make
open.
sure, do y'all want to do talking stick or do y'all want me to allow y'all to
Talking
like
stick
go
is
back and forth?
preferable. I know Jester's kind of like an ape sometimes, especially
Talking,
when
yeah,
he's gonna
talking
like
stick is
eventually
fine.
the
Talking stick is fine.
conversation. Yeah,
Talking stick is
so
fine.
let's just do talking stick. So I'll just give my opening first. Just
Let's do
wait on the
let's do
monitor
two.
to
Let's do like
open.
2 minutes max. By the way, I don't want him rambling
Of
forever.
course, definitely.
It's max, of
So
And so let's ping it. Yeah.
Mhm.
All right, go ahead.
Yeah, so my opening statement to the topic, to be more specific, is that it's going to be between James Lee versus Gunn. I'm going to be taking the position that Prime James Lee beats Gunn, and he's taking the opposing position. I am going to present an argument in favor of why James Lee beats Gunn. It's like a pretty obvious fact. So let's just get things rolling, guys.
Yeah.
do you want to give
Set
an
it.
opening statement too, Jester, and then let him go into his argument, or you just want him to go into it?
No, I don't need open statement. I can just go into my argument. You can respond.
Okay, I'll just give my arguments. Just like an inductive argument, you know.
Yeah.
Check the side chat of the stage real quickly.
The side chat. What are you talking about?
Yeah, the side chat of the stage. Dumb.
Can you just post it in documentation? We're good.
Okay, got you.
Thank you. Good boy.
Check documentation.
You see how he did it? This guy's good, boy.
Yeah, I'm going to read it out for you. So, premise
Thank
one:
you.
characters with legendary status are consistently portrayed to be above characters without legendary status. Premise two: James
Mhm.
Lee has legendary status in the series. Conclusion: given the inductive data via premise one, James Lee is stronger than Gunn, all else being equal. Which premise do you contend with?
Okay. The legendary status premise.
Oh, okay, got you. Here's the evidence.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so his status is literally compared to Gaprion Kim, who is a legend of the Zero generation. Plus, James Lee have been stated on numerous occasions to be the legend of the first generation. It's actually really ridiculous, Jester, for it to even question that
Okay.
fucking premise. What are you doing?
Okay. So you ready? You done?
I'm ready for the debunk. Go ahead and give the debunk.
Yeah,
if
I'm
you
ready.
give
Here we
one.
go. So first
I'm
they're
listening.
talking about the pinnacle of each generation. They're not comparing Gaprion Kim to James Lee because they're not comparable at all because James Lee has direct scaling under Gaprion Kim. But the legend status is actually given out 3 different times. If you didn't know, they give it out in Questism to a random bum from Gangbook. So what's your argument for the legend status for that guy?
Yeah, so that was like a non-point, like really horrible with the cheeks response. So you mentioned that Gaprion King is like someone who's stronger than James Lee. That's not something which is denied by my arguments. It's not even something which has an impact on my arguments. All I'm saying here is the characters who is portrayed to be the legend of a particular generation is, generally speaking, stronger than characters who does not have the status. Now, if you want the statements of people claiming that James Lee is the legend of the first generation, that's really easy to actually find. So all I mean by someone having the legendary status is someone having a statement or a set of statements in the narrative or series of them being a legend of the first generation. Your points are getting crushed right now, Jester.
Okay, Apollo,
Come on,
can you
now, step up your game.
Apollo, can you
Buzz the fuck
justify Choyun's bodyguard from Questism being above the Allied?
Uh-oh, someone is lost in the conversation. Let's just get the retard back
You're
on
not
track.
tracking.
No one is making the claim. Wait, just relax.
He's called
No one
he's
is
called the
making the
legend
claim
though.
about
So
what?
can you justify
Yikes!
that?
Someone is mad right now. Yikes! Someone is getting
I'm not mad, bro.
interrupted because you're getting crushed right now.
Look,
Just calm down, dear Jester. Yeah, relax,
Okay,
Jim
so
Jump.
Jester,
Okay.
I mean, he's
muted
kind of just
you.
like
Apollo, you can
avoiding me.
finish. Go ahead.
There you go.
Yeah, so as you guys can clearly see, Jester is having the schizo moment, right? Talking about questism when you're talking about Lookism. Oh, really? Oh, bad. This is so embarrassing. So Jester, I'm going to repeat the argument one more time, and maybe if what I'm saying is not getting through to your thick skull, maybe someone else can clarify for you. Okay, all I'm saying here is simply, right, that characters, okay, with legendary status, and all I mean by characters with legendary status is characters, right, which has a set of statements in a given narrative about them being a legend of a particular generation, generally speaking, is stronger than characters without this status. Is this me making the claim that this is true in all cases? No, you dumb fuck. Right. All I'm saying is that this is generally true. A generalization does not mean a universalization. So even if you have exceptional circumstances towards this being true, the preponderance of evidence given the consistent narrative of the inductive data favors my conclusion, and so my conclusion would be far more likely than your conclusion. So how about they stop giving some non-points and actually address what I'm talking about here, confused sonny boy?
So first off, he said, I
Jester,
don't
you
know
can go
why he's
ahead.
talking about. Yeah, he says, I don't know why
Wait,
he's talking about
I didn't mean, my
questism.
bad, Jester. You can go ahead
Yeah.
now, Jester.
Can you sir mute him
Yeah,
before
I
he
got
tries
you.
to get rhetorical? Yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead.
He's not sir muted.
Yes, he is. He's server muted.
No, he's not. No, he is. You're
Okay.
confused.
Oh wait,
Yeah.
I'm tripping. I pressed the wrong.
Yeah, you're
Holy
tripping.
shit, I'm
So for
retarded.
everybody in the chat to know how lost Apollo is, I'm going to address everything that he just said. He says, I'm making a non-point. Questism is directly canon to Lookism. He says, oh, it's generally the case that they hand out legend status. I just proposed you a situation where they hand out legend status and the guy's a bum. And there's a direct statement putting James Lee under somebody that's not from his generation. I'll post it right here. So I want Apollo to respond to the statement. In chapter 513, yeah, I'm going to post it for y'all right now. Give me a second. Don't use up my talking stick because I want to post my evidence here. In chapter 513, here we go. Charles Toy, the guy who trained James Lee and raised him, said whoever it may be that could show up to the gate would be dead to gun. My character. That's one scan. Hold on, let me go to documentation. And wait, is this reaffirmed? Maybe. In chapter 506, what does he say again? Yeah, I'll post it for y'all again. Hold on, I forgot to say. Just gotta go to Webtoon. Yeah, in chapter 506, he says the same thing, that the true extent of Gun's prowess cannot be grasped. And in chapter 505, he says no one can adequately describe the sheer power of the sheer scale of his power. So Charles Choi, the guy who raised James Lee and trained him from scratch, from birth, literally says nobody could beat Gun. There's nobody that could beat Gun. And now we know, since there's nobody that could beat Gun, and the legend status is something that definitively puts somebody ahead of somebody else, that's all the argument I'm making. That's legend status is not something that just says, hey, I'm stronger than you. And Gun is not from the first generation. We have definitive evidence saying that Gun is above James Lee from a credible source. So go ahead and respond to the argument.
All right. So I'm gonna unmute Apollo and I'm gonna mute you, Jester.
Okay,
you can
so
go ahead,
now
Apollo.
that Jester is done with his confused meta ramble, okay, I'm just gonna reiterate my point. So just to reiterate, I clearly specified, right, that it's a generalization-based argument. It's not to say that it is entailed from the inductive data or the consistent trend that this position is sure, but rather that it is the case that such a proposition is going to be probabilistically justified in virtue of this specific evidence. Now, I'm not sure if you understand what this is, considering your lack of knowledge and your severe ignorance on argumentation theory. But all I'm saying there is simply that it is more likely. Now, your response regarding to Charles Choi, I like the evidence for Charles Choi knowing enough about James Lee for him to make such a claim, number one. And number two, I'm pretty certain you don't even believe Gun is number one in the series. So when Charles Choi is making the claim that Gun cannot be defeated by anyone, there's no one who can defeat Gun, right? That's false. Clearly, that's actually not even true, because we know for a fact that it is in fact possible in practice to beat Gun, given the fact that we have seen characters who has displayed strength relative to Gun, or at least above Gun. Okay, so that's like really weird for it to even make, because that's inconsistent with your own belief system, because you don't even believe that Gun is number one in the series, unless you want to switch up that specific belief you have for the sake of this conversation. But irrespective of such, you have not demonstrated, right, any sort of evidence supports the idea that this is even a credible source whatsoever. I can list at least 20 different situations in which you have a character with a legendary status who is actually stronger than characters with that legendary status. Like, think of like Gabriel Kim and him being stronger than the entire Big Deal, for example. All the Big Deal characters do not have legendary status, and those Big Deal characters are weaker than James Lee. They're weaker than Gabriel Kim. Same goes for the current allied members. Those characters do not have legendary status, and those characters are weaker than these two characters which have legendary status. So we have a plethora of cases, okay, which indicates that it is the case that we have strong reason to believe that the character with legendary status is actually above a character without legendary status, because of a consistent trend in the narrative support and such. So how about they stop giving these dookie butter Dunkin' Nuts points and actually address what the fuck I'm saying, Jester? Lock the fucking retard.
Okay, so I mute him. So it's really unfortunate to everybody that the debate just ended because Apollo refuses to read Lookism. Let's respond to the first claim about the credibility of Charles Choi on James Lee. In chapter 492 of Lookism, When he's asked about who raised him up and called him a subordinate, James Lee makes one statement. He says, I respond to only one man, the guy who trained me. And guess who he says? Oh, wow, surprise. He says it's Charles Choi. Let me get it again. Hold on, give me 2 seconds. Yeah. So there's a response to claim number one. He wanted another Schizo Rambo, talking about the legend status. Unfortunately, Apollo can't read English because he's very Jamaican. In chapter 540 of Lookism, they say that Daniel is going to take the spot that Gunn left empty, and then they said he's a legend prospect, meaning the narrative called Gunn a legend too. So since the narrative is calling Gunn a legend, and since Charles Choi is a credible source of information, I want Apollo to prove that Charles Choi is not a credible source of information, because if he can't prove that Charles Choi is not a credible source of information, unfortunately, he loses the debate right now instantaneously. So, yeah, he could go speak right now.
Okay, I'm server muting you and unmuting Apollo. You can go ahead, Apollo.
I want you guys to watch out for two things. Number one is Poison's Dick Munchin in the chat, and number two is Jester's rhetorical gaslighting in this conversation. Talks about the idea of me being unable to read English because I'm too Jamaican. Criticizes English skills, then proceeds to stutter, has worse eloquence, worse rhetoric, worse articulation. Really ironic, isn't it? I mean, let's just get on to the substance again. So let's just talk about the points you made. Charles Troy traced James Lee. I don't see how this is evidence, Mr. Jester. I can see why your name is Jester because you're a fucking clown. I don't see how this is evidence for the claim that Charles Choi's claim is credible enough for him to actually be in the position where he is accurate on the matter. And plus, you have yet to respond because you've either forgotten this point or you have no response towards this point. You have yet to respond or give a rejoinder towards the claim I made regarding the inconsistent belief system that is created from you granting Charles Choi to have this 100% fallibility status. Because you said Charles Choi makes the claim that no one can beat Gunn. But then I'm pretty certain, if you want to clarify this for the voice call, I'm certain that you don't even believe that Gunn is the strongest character in the series. Because I've seen your tier list. You don't even believe Gunn is the strongest character in the series. And we have preponderance of evidence demonstrating that it is the case, that there are characters in the series who are shown strength levels, which is emblematic of being able to at least beat Gunn. It's at least practically possible for a Gunn to be beaten. We've seen several pieces of evidence for this specific proposition, which goes against Charles Choi's statement, which are appealing to debunk my argument. So again, I just wanted to do a couple of things. Number one, get better rhetoric. Number two, get better argumentation. Number three, respond to what the fuck I'm saying and stop rambling, motherfucker.
All right, Jester.
I don't know how he managed to not respond. He's talking about what I believe. I actually do think Gunn's the strongest in the verse
I
right
just
now.
have a
It's
few
stated, if you
questions. So
read the
when you
scan
say
that I sent,
maximize
that Gunn has
utility,
been
what do you
training
mean?
his
I
genius
refer to like some
by
sort of
himself to himself and applying it to himself the entire time from the 2 years of what happened in Chiang Liang till now. So I actually do think Gunn's the strongest in the verse right now. And if you read the most recent webtoon translation, they straight up state that Gunn is stronger than Shingen, the guy who went rel with Gaprion Kim. Gaprion Kim had to jump Shingen, and they're stating that the current Gunn right now is stronger than Shingen. That is a statement that's stated verbatim. So I do think Gunn right now is the strongest in the verse. Addressing that, that's not even a real argument. It's really unfortunate. And he's not tracking me. I'm giving you credible evidence. He trained him from birth. Charles Choi would be the most credible source of information in the verse right now on James Lee. I'm not saying he's 100% accurate, but he could be 99.9% accurate. He trained him from birth. He showed him everything that he knows now, and he's been with him working as an associate the entire time. So if anybody's more credible than James Lee, it has to be Charles Choi. And Charles Choi stated 3 times over that nobody could beat Gunn. You still haven't presented an argument for why James Lee could beat Gunn. I presented to you 3 different times an argument. I showed you why the legend statement doesn't even work. I showed you Gunn getting granted the legend statement by James Lee himself. James Lee literally said Gunn is a legend and Daniel's going to fill the spot. And Charles Choi said he's stronger than Gunn, say he's stronger than James Lee. So I don't really care about your comments on rhetoric. You're still not addressing any arguments. You're really pressed. I do think Gunn's the strongest, and show me why Charles Choi is not a credible source of information, or just concede the debate or conclude. I'm done. You can unmute him.
Yeah, got you. So Juju and just the other people were just obviously hating. Just to address the polls in the chat, I got a lot of comments before this started this debate about how there have been a lot of plans in the background and shit, which is really funny. But when this gets uploaded on the YouTube, we're gonna see what the true consensus actually believes about this fucking debate. You made the claim that I have not presented an argument for James Lee beaten gun. I don't know if this is just another display of your ignorance of what an argument is, or it's just you attempting to gaslight to actually convince people who doesn't know what the fuck they're talking about that you're winning this conversation. But Jester, an argument is just any set of premises in support of a conclusion, which is what I've quite literally presented in the chat, which utilizes inductive reasoning in the first premise to extrapolate to the probability of the conclusion, which is that James Lee beats Gunn. So that's just a false claim, number one, which is that I did not present an argument for why James Lee beats Gunn. Number two, you again make a claim that, well, Charles Choi is a credible source, and you believe that now Gunn is the strongest character, et cetera, et cetera. Now, I mean, if you're going to believe that Gunn is the strongest character on the basis of this statement, right, then you would have to be saying, for example, that it is the case that it is impossible for Gunn to be beaten, right? Now, is this actually true? Well, I don't believe this to be true. I think that it is possible for Gunn to be beaten. I think you'd have to demonstrate evidence for why it is the case that it is impossible for Gunn to be beaten. Which, if you're going to appeal to the Charles Choi statement, by the way, I'll need evidence for that claim. Number one, the credibility of that specific statement, and also you kept on saying that the training thing is going to be something which is good evidence for your claim. Oh, he trains James Lee. Oh, he trains James Lee. Okay, well, guess what? I want you to show evidence for him training James Lee and witnessing James's full power. Have you presented any evidence for this claim? I don't know about that. I think that we can always interpret it to be the case that he has only trained James Lee prior to fighting Seong Ji Yuk, for example, instead of training James Lee through the entire time, including when you actually trained or when he actually trained to reach his peak. Right. So we have no sort of evidence for any of the claims, any of the presumptions, any of the assumptions you're making, which your argument is predicated upon. It's pretty obvious that you've lost the confidence you started off this debate with because you've realized that you got your cheeks rhetorically spread apart. Right. And so I just want it to be the case that if you're going to repeat the same nonsense, the same nonsensical, empty calorie points you've been doing the entirety of this conversation, then we can just head to conclusions after this specific response you have right now.
Go ahead, Jester.
So empty calorie rhetoric is everything that he just did and more because he managed to not respond to a single thing that I said. But I'll give you more evidence. I posted it in scans, but unfortunately Apollo still can't read and didn't read any of the scans that I gave him. Chiang Liang was an arc from 2 years ago. It's a 2-year flashback. James Lee still works under Charles Choi today. He just recently betrayed him. So yes, he knows about Prime James Lee because Prime James Lee was 1.5 years ago. He never betrayed Charles Choi until then. So yes, he has information on this Prime James Lee. That's one response. The other response I'm going to give, Shintaro, Shingen's twin brother, the guy who's relative to Gaprion Kim, the guy who you stated to be a legend and who you didn't think that James was stronger than, said that Gun is stronger than Shingen, right? So from the information that we have right now, no, I don't think that there's anybody capable of beating Gun. If you do think that that's not a correct statement, I'd love you to provide me some type of evidence, some type of argumentation for anybody in the verse right now that has any feet above Gun, because you won't be able to. You're a dickhead. You have no evidence. You can't read Lookism. It's really unfortunate. So you have no evidence to provide me for any scaling of James Lee above Gun. I've literally given you 5 different lines of scaling of Gun above James Lee directly, and you're still managing to not respond, giving me empty calorie rhetoric, like you said. And you stole that from Forks, by the way. That's done. So if he doesn't respond, I'm cool to go to conclusions. Wait, don't talk about my... Yo, Malam, chill, bro. Shh. Chill, bro, chill. You can mute me, bro. Let him respond.
All right. Go ahead, Apollo.
Apollo, if you feel like going to
What's up? So
conclusions,
anywho, to
y'all
respond
can
to
go
what
to
he just
conclusions.
said, his only response is given towards the skeptical objection I've given to the credibility of Charles Choi's statement as it relates to James Lee's strength is him saying that James Lee in his peak worked under Charles Choi and did not betray Charles Choi. Okay, retard. How does it follow from this specific fact of the matter that he has witnessed James Lee's full power or he has knowledge of James Lee's full power? For all we know, the only time James Lee and Charles Choi are around each other is when they're making plans as a means of you could say, dominates in the specific thing that they were planning to do regarding the generation. That's the only thing that we could actually deduce from the current evidence that we have seen when James Lee and Charles Choi and Tom Lee, Gu, etc., were in the same room planning with Eugene. Right. That's the only thing we can extrapolate from what we have seen so far. Now, we know for a fact that yes, James Lee did not betray Charles Choi, and yes, he was still working with Charles Choi, but I don't see how any of this sort of pattern or data you're talking about here is going to be pointing towards the claim that you're trying to justify here, Jester. And it's actually really quite sad that you're too mentally incapacitated to realize such an obvious fact. And so I'm just going to move on from this point that you're going to ragdoll in, you got fucked in jackhammer styling. Okay, we're just going to move on to a different part, okay, which is simply you said that you presented 5 scalings, which proves James Lee is weaker than Gunn. If that was what you've said, then no, you've not presented 5 scalings. And I can just always question the credibility of all of those scalings that you're going to present for Gunn beating James Lee, just in virtue of the strong, indubitable narrative argument I've shown on the table, which you've yet to grasp with that pea-sized brain of yours. Okay, so that's just the only thing I have to say, really. Do you have any other responses, Jester, or do you want to head to conclusions?
Jester,
He
you're
said
unmuted.
absolutely nothing, so I'd love to go to conclusions. He
I bet.
said, he put the 5 arguments I gave him into question by not putting them into question. He says, I don't believe in them because I don't believe in them. He doesn't even know what the arguments are. So he literally didn't track a single thing I said. It's really unfortunate. So let's go to
Okay, since
conclusions. Yeah.
both of y'all want to head to conclusions, you can go first.
Me?
Yeah, since you're the first person unmuted.
Okay.
Unless you want to allow Apollo to go first. It's up to you.
I mean, it's up to him. I can go first.
Okay.
What does he want to do?
Well, let me unmute him and see. Apollo, do you want to give your conclusion first, or you want to allow Justin
I want
to
to
go
give a
first?
good conclusions last because I went first for the debate.
Okay.
All right, cool.
Cool with me. Yeah. So in the debate, he said, I never said James was stronger than Gaprion Kim, and I showed direct scaling for Gun above Gaprion Kim. I showed direct scaling of Gun getting given the legend statement. I showed Gun above Shingen. I've shown Gun getting stated 5 different times by Charles Choi above James Lee. So now that we have all these pieces of information that Apollo went out of his time to waste 30 minutes of and not attack either of them, right? All I said was that Charles Choi would be the most credible, informant on James Lee's power. Why do we know this? Because he trained him from birth. He knew him from when he was little up to when he is now to when he betrayed him. So he has not provided any alternative or any real incentive as to why Charles Choi would be an incredible or uncredible source of information for James Lee when he literally showed him everything he knew from the beginning. So unfortunately for Apollo, he didn't track anything. He didn't even really make any arguments. He tried to argue like Archie. He tried to give no arguments, no rhetoric. Just sat here, threw a couple insults and said, well, if you think this is the case, and some Jamaican mumbo jumbo. So he just lost the debate. He got blown out. Batista bombed him. It's really unfortunate. He can't read English. He had to go back to class. So that's it. That's my conclusion.
All right, Apollo, you can go ahead.
Yeah. Are you ready? So anyway, it's just a bad day for all the Jesters, the Munchers, the meat sack slurpers. It's just a really bad day. Your boy just did a booty cheeks debate performance, really bad. The small fry who has the IQ of a bullfrog, I should say. Sorry about that. Quite literally just said that I have not responded to his responses or objections to my points, when quite literally all of the scalings he talks about, which is supposedly supposed to be an undercut and defeater towards my argument, all hinges on this one idea. This is just one simple idea, this one simple claim. He just struggles to fucking prove, which is the credibility of Charles Choi's statement. Now, by credibility, all I'm talking about here is quite simply just whether or not Charles Choi has knowledge of James Lee's full power. Now, he referenced 2 things, and King, you can tell me to shut the fuck up. I'm gonna keep on talking. I'm gonna keep on crying like a little bitch in the fucking chat, retard. So, anywho, just to respond to what he said, Jester said that working under Charles Choi and not betraying Charles Choi, and I have it typed out in the text debate chat, is evidence for Charles Choi knowing his full power. He's not shown the connection or the correlation or the logical link between these 2 given ideas. I have pressed him on numerous occasions. I've given him numerous chances to actually prove this basic presupposition, which he has failed to prove. He has not shown any empirical evidence of Charles Choi directly witnessing James Lee's full power. I've given alternative, more plausible interpretations, which does not add more assumptions, by talking about the idea, which is that the only times we have seen Charles Choi be on James Lee, right, in the moment where James is at his peak and is working under Charles Choi and not betraying him, is when they're in that room scheming plans regarding that specific generation and so forth. And so he would have to be adding the extra assumption that not only has they hung out in this room when they're scheming plans, but it is also the case that Charles Choi has seen James Lee's full power and he was also training James Lee in that specific time period, which he's not shown any evidence for because he's just a bad, terrible asswipe debater. It's just expected. He got peed over really badly, or peed all over his face, just really embarrassing. That's my conclusions, guys, and I'm glad that we were able to entertain you guys. If you guys found this debate entertaining, no hard feelings between me and Jester, by the way. It's just for the entertainment activity stuff. It was a good
Good
debate.
debate. So everybody, man, we got like
Yeah.
50 people on stage. I just put a poll in
50
public
people.
public